Hello! Today we're going to talk about practical counter melody writing. This is not a video about the classical counterpoint of the Fuchs method and first to fifth species counterpoint, but rather a more easy and quick and practical guideline to get you writing counter melodies and getting more life into your compositions. And counter melodies are great because you do get that liveliness into your composition with multiple voices going around and having their moments. And it's a great way to vary the way that you present your harmonic context around your melody or melodic materials. And it's also a great way to create new melodic material that you can use throughout your composition. So definitely a new skill for the toolbox that you should know how to do. Now I'm going to teach you a little bit about what I think about when writing counter melodies. I've collected a couple of simple guidelines that I use myself for doing this to help you on your way and getting a good sound out of your counter melodies. First up, think about rhythmical independence. The rule of thumb here is that when your melody is active, your counter melody should be more static. And when your melody is more static or passive or have long notes, your counter melody, it can shine a little bit more and be more active. Of course, this is not a hard rule. Use your intuition and find out how you want your counter melody to sound. But if you roughly follow this, you'll get quite independent melodies. Of course, it's fine to have parallel motion sometimes and do other things, but this is a very good basis to have in your mind when writing counter melodies. You want something that complements each other and not something that's completely similar. The next guidelines is avoiding parallel octaves and unisons. These are the most stable intervals, and if you do them in parallel, it can sometimes sound like the two voices just becomes one voice and the independence disappears. Some people will also advise you against using parallel fifths. I don't think they're as counterproductive to independence as octaves and unisons, but it is a rule that is very much taught in different universities and schools because it was often avoided in the common practice period of music, which means music written from the 1600s to the 1900s. They used to avoid these. I think they're fine, but some people don't like them, and you just decide for yourself if you like parallel fifths or not. Another guideline is trying to think about, is this a purely melodic counter melody, or is it more of a bass line I'm writing? Because they are a bit different in how you write them. Melodic lines tend to be more stepwise in motion, not having that many big leaps, and you should follow the general guidelines of writing melodies. Some leaps are fine because you need to have a leap sometimes to have a interesting melody and to solve different problems in your music. But then you should follow that by a repetition or a step in either direction, not to get too many jumps in a row. If you write a bass line, on the other hand, the bass is often hitting the root of the chord. It can hit the third or the fifth, but it's most often hitting the root, and it needs to jump about more. And it's more accepted and okay and sounds fine when the bass is jumping around. So don't be afraid of a couple of leaps in a row in the bass. But still, you should try to think a little bit melodic and have some stepwise motion when you can in your counter melody bass lines. And lastly, of course, follow your intuition. Don't follow any of my guidelines if you think it sounds worse than what you did in the first place. If you hear something in your head that's much better than any of the guidelines, just do that because that is probably the right choice to do. These are just guidelines, and if you mix that with intuition, you get something called guided intuition, which is the best way to write. It's both creative, but you have a lot of tools to draw upon when you write music. So now I'm going to show you how to actually do this, because I have a super simple two-step process for getting quick and effective counter melodies into your writing. But of course, you can't have a counter melody if you don't have a melody. So I've written a short 4-bar melody here just as an example, and we're going to do this process on it several times. So a simple melody in G minor, and counter melodies often work best on melodies that have a little bit of a room to fill in with other voices. If the melody is super busy and a super quick tempo, of course it's going to be harder to write an effective counter melody. So it's best to choose your melodies wisely when you're going to write counter melodies. So here we have several places where there is a little bit of room for the counter melody to shine. And the first thing we're going to do when writing a counter melody is writing a skeleton. And a skeleton, of course, is just a framework that we're going to build the rest of the counter melody on. So what you're going to do is look at your melody and see what chord tones are missing from the chord. So the first note here is a G, and it's a G in C minor. So what else from C minor is missing? We're missing an E flat and a C. So our counter melody could be either of those notes. Of course, it could also be a G, but I'll start with an E flat. I like the third for the first skeleton note. And when the melody jumps up to a C, I'll just keep the E flat. And then the melody jumps down to a B flat. And this is a G minor chord. So we're missing a G and we're missing a D. And I've chosen a G for my counter melody skeleton. And I'll just do this throughout the rest of the melody and just fill in missing chord tones so I have a framework. And the next step I call connecting the dots. So now you can start writing more a melody using your skeleton as the framework. So for the first bar here, there is not much movement in the melody. There are just half notes. So we have a little bit of a room to let the counter melody create some movement. So here I've just written a neighbor note and up again to the E flat, and I'll connect the E flat and the G by using a passing tone on the F. But now the melody gets more active in the second bar, then I'll be more static with the counter melody. So try to be static when the melody is active and be more active when the melody is static. So I'll just land on the G and stay there, and then have a leap down to the D, and I'll try to connect the D and the A here by putting in some 8 notes, get a little bit more of a motion, and I'll connect the A and the C with a B flat, getting some movement in there. And then I'll stay still again because now the melody is more active, and I'll end up with a G and a B flat as my ending chord. So of course you don't need to be as active as I was on this melody. I'm just showing you one way of doing it, but you can make a lot of different choices in here, different chord tones, not necessarily being as active with the counter melody, but it sounds fine, and it's its own melody. But let's just delete all that for now. Let's go back to just having the melody, and I'll show you how to create 2 counter melodies. So when creating 2 counter melodies, of course, we'll do the same process, but I want to start over because if you've already written one counter melody and it's as active as this is, you don't have any room for a third voice. So we need to be more economic with our voices. It can be saturated really quickly if you have too much motion in all of the voices all of the time. So I'll start from the beginning and I'll do the same thing. Now, one counter melody is going to be just a melodic voice, and the lowest counter melody is going to have the function of a bass voice. I'll just start by doing the skeleton again. I'll fill in missing chord tones, trying to fill out the chord as best as possible. So we still have a G in the melody. I'll still choose the E flat in the first counter melody, and I'll choose the C on the bottom to get the root of the C chord. Then the melody jumps up to a C. So the bass doesn't necessarily need to be on the C anymore. It can rather walk up to the third. So we have a C minor in first inversion. And I'll fill in the missing G with the first counter melody voice. And I'll just keep doing this, filling in the rest of the tune with a skeleton. And when that's done, we can start connecting the dots. So here in the counter melody, I could connect the E flat and the G with an F, but also I could connect the C and the E flat with a D. But I want to introduce a little different rhythm in the bass just to keep the two counter melodies a little bit independent of each other, not having the exact same rhythmical value. So I'll choose a 8 note here, so you get a different way of moving. Instead of. And I see an opportunity here for the bass. If I want to connect up to the G here, I can use the F and connect the B with an A, and I'll repeat the same melody here. Also at the same time, make a little bit of a theme out of this bass voice. And that has a strong rhythmical character, I think. And then the last bar, I'll keep the bass just on the root note and just repeat that. It's had its moment. Maybe now it's going to be more calm and let the other counter melody have its moment in the last bar here. And this is what it sounds like with two counter melodies. And this is what that sounds like orchestrated out for the whole orchestra. And that's how easy it is to create a counter melody. It's just a two-step process: create a skeleton and connect the dots. If you like this video, please do click the like button to push it out to more people that would enjoy my content. And if you want to see more of my videos, just push the subscribe button and the notification bell to get notified when I drop my next video. And until next time.